You care far too much. You care if they're judging you. You care if they still like you. You care whether they think you're kind, impressive, good, or successful, and you're exhausted. You say you want peace, but you wake up every day trapped in a performance. You play the role so well, you almost believe it yourself, but something inside you is dying, and it's not your weakness, it's your real self, strangled by approval. Montaigne knew this disease long before social media, and he offered a medicine we've all forgotten: stop caring. Most people don't live, they perform. You learn it early. Be polite, be helpful, be impressive, be normal, be liked. You're told these things are virtues, but underneath, they're chains. You don't speak freely, you calculate. You don't feel freely, you suppress. You don't act freely, you anticipate consequences. And at some point you forget who you even are underneath all that performance. You're not living, you're maintaining a curated identity. Montaigne saw this clearly. He wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." But you don't belong to yourself, you belong to your audience. One reason you're tired isn't that you're doing too much. It's that you're being too many versions of yourself. You act differently around your family, your friends, your co-workers, your followers. You have different tones, filters, personas, and you wonder why you're anxious. You think the anxiety means you're broken. It doesn't. It means you're betraying your center. You can only feel calm when there's one version of you left, the real one. But to find it, you have to stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What truth am I afraid to say?" The world has told you that caring too much is noble, but it's not. It's dangerous. Because the more you care what others think, the easier you are to control. They post a comment and you spiral. They disapprove and you shrink. They reject you and you hate yourself. This is not compassion, this is slavery. You have handed your peace over to people who don't know you, don't love you, and don't care. And the cost? Your self-respect, your clarity, your time, your joy. Montaigne didn't fall for it. He walked away from power, titles, and reputation to write in solitude, not out of cowardice, but strength. People confuse caring less with being cold, but Montaigne wasn't emotionless. He was free. He still felt, still connected, still loved, but he chose what to care about. He didn't waste time managing the image others projected onto him. He spent his time exploring his soul. That's not apathy, that's clarity, and that clarity gave him power. The kind of power that doesn't scream, doesn't chase, doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. You don't lose your humanity when you detach, you reclaim it. Here's a hard truth. Sometimes your caring isn't about love, it's about control. You want to be seen as good. You want to be seen as valuable. You want to be seen as kind. It's about your image, not your integrity. You say yes too often, not because you care, but because you're scared to lose approval. You overgive, not out of love, but because rejection terrifies you. And you smile when you want to scream, because the role of the good one feels safer than your truth. But Montaigne called this out centuries ago. He didn't live for appearances, he lived for essence. Dangerous, not because they're harmful, but because they can't be manipulated anymore. You can't guilt them, you can't flatter them, you can't control them with silence, rejection, praise, or punishment. They aren't cold, they're sovereign. Montaigne embodied this. While others scrambled for royal favor and public admiration, he spent his days walking through vineyards, writing quietly, and questioning everything. And in that stillness, he found what most people never will, his true self, undistorted, unbothered, and unshakable. But there's something deeper here, because Montaigne didn't just stop caring what people thought. He stopped needing the entire structure of performance. In the next part, we'll explore what happened when he disappeared from society, what he discovered in solitude, and why most people fear silence, because it reveals too much. Stay close, the unraveling has just begun. At the height of his political career, Michel de Montaigne was a rising star, respected, powerful, needed. And one day, he just left. He retreated to a tower in his family estate, not to hide from the world, but to unlearn it. For over a decade, he read, thought, and wrote in solitude, because he knew a mind constantly exposed to public noise cannot find private truth. Society wanted him to play a role. Montaigne wanted to play none. He didn't retreat because he hated people. He retreated because he refused to become someone else's idea of himself. Montaigne described his tower as a little back shop of the soul, a place untouched by gossip, politics, performance. Most people never build this place. They fill every silence with content, every still moment with stimulation, every discomfort with distraction. But if you want peace, you must create a place inside you where no one else is allowed to enter. Not their opinion, not their expectation, not their judgment, just you and truth. This isn't escape, it's return. Modern life makes you afraid of your own mind. That's why you scroll before bed, why you play something in the background constantly, why you check your phone the moment a pause enters the room. Because you're afraid of what the silence might say. But silence doesn't hurt you. It shows you what already lives inside you. And if you never stop moving, you'll never know what that is. Montaigne embraced silence not as an enemy, but as a mirror. And in doing so, he met someone most people never meet: himself. Here's something radical. You don't owe the world an explanation. Not for your decisions, not for your feelings, not for your truth. You don't have to defend your solitude or justify your peace. The person who truly stops caring knows that explanation is often just a softer form of apology. I'm sorry I chose me. But Montaigne didn't apologize. He let people misunderstand him. He let them think he was strange. He let them wonder why he disappeared. Because he knew the only people who get mad at boundaries are the ones who benefited from your lack of them. Stillness isn't laziness. It's not passivity, it's power. Because when you're still, you see more clearly. You act more deliberately. You speak only when it matters. You no longer react to the world. You respond. That difference is everything. Montaigne wasn't passive in his tower. He was sharpening his mind, his awareness, his detachment. He came out of solitude stronger than ever. Not harder, but deeper. Not colder, but clearer. You know what happens when you stop performing? You laugh more. You smile for real, not for pictures. You enjoy moments instead of posting about them. You feel light, not because your life is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying things that don't belong to you. Montaigne believed in this kind of joy, not the sugar-high happiness of dopamine, but the quiet, strong joy of alignment. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself, he wrote. And once you do, the world loses its grip on you. Busyness is one of the last respectable addictions. If you're always busy, you never have to sit with yourself. You can look important, sound responsible, appear successful. But Montaigne didn't buy it. He saw that most people stay busy because they're terrified of asking real questions. Who am I when no one is watching? Why am I doing any of this? What have I avoided feeling for years? Solitude isn't loneliness, it's spiritual hygiene. And most people are spiritually filthy. When someone insults you and you smile, not to be passive, but because it simply doesn't land, that's sacred. When someone pressures you and you decline, not with resentment, but with calm conviction, that's sacred. When the world says, here's what you should want, do, become, and you reply, no thanks, I'm already whole. That's not arrogance, that's soul. And it's terrifying to people who've never built one. But here's where it gets real. Montaigne's detachment wasn't about escape. It was about preparation. In the next part, we'll explore how he used solitude, humor, and mortality to destroy his fear of death, and why, when you truly stop fearing suffering, you start to live for the first time. Why do you care so much? Because you're afraid of what will happen if you stop. Afraid they'll leave, afraid they'll judge, afraid the world will turn its back on you. Montaigne wasn't immune to fear, but he did something most people never dare to do. He walked toward it. He wrote, "A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears." Most people suffer twice, once in reality and once in anticipation. But Montaigne learned, if you can stop fearing fear itself, you are free. Nothing forces clarity like death. Montaigne didn't obsess over death because he was dark, but because he knew that most people live like they're immortal. They chase approval as if it will save them. Chase success like it's a shield against oblivion. Chase youth like aging is a sin. But Montaigne faced death constantly through illness, war, and personal reflection. And in that awareness, he found something priceless, a sense of urgency, without anxiety. If you know you're going to die, you stop wasting time being fake. You'd expect Montaigne to be heavy, but he wasn't. He laughed more than most philosophers, even at himself, because once you detach from the fear of being wrong, or stupid, or judged, you're allowed to be human. You stop trying to impress. You stop trying to win. You let life be ridiculous. That's not weakness. That's emotional strength. He wrote, "The most certain sign of wisdom is cheerfulness, because a wise person knows life is absurd, and the moment you stop clinging to control, you can finally enjoy the ride." Strange truth. The people who care too much often end up hurting others the most. Why? Because they expect return. They expect gratitude. They expect others to mirror their effort. And when that doesn't happen, they snap, because their kindness was actually a bargain, a contract they never said out loud, but expected you to sign. Montaigne called this out by living differently. He gave without keeping score, loved without obsession, detached, not out of coldness, but because real love doesn't require a leash. There's a strange phenomenon. The less you care about being liked, the more people are drawn to you. Why? Because your calm is rare, because your presence isn't demanding, because you don't manipulate with your neediness. When you stop clinging, you become magnetic, not through charm, but through authenticity. That's what Montaigne embodied. He didn't play the social game. He wasn't impressive in the usual ways, but he was real, and people could feel it. Do you argue often? Do you try to win your conversations? Explain your side? Prove your point? Montaigne let that go. He realized that most arguments aren't about truth. They're about ego. One person wants to feel smart. The other doesn't want to feel wrong. And neither one is actually listening. When you detach, you stop needing to win. You say your truth once. If they don't hear it, you walk away, because peace is more valuable than dominance. Imagine waking up tomorrow with nothing to prove, no one to impress, no fight to win, no image to maintain. What would you do differently? What would you stop doing? How much of your life is driven by insecurity, disguised as ambition? Montaigne let go of ambition. He let go of conquest. He chose inner expansion instead. That's not giving up, that's growing up. But what happens when this freedom becomes a mask? Because detachment can be beautiful, but it can also become a hiding place. In the next part, we'll confront the dark temptation of using detachment to avoid intimacy, vulnerability, and real connection. Because the ultimate paradox is this: when you truly stop caring what others think, you finally become able to love them. Let's be honest, some people don't detach out of strength. They detach because they're scared. Scared to be seen, scared to be vulnerable, scared to feel anything too deeply. So they wrap themselves in indifference like it's armor. But it's not detachment, it's avoidance. You can't call yourself free if you're still running. Montaigne wasn't cold, he wasn't aloof. He felt everything. He just stopped letting it control him. There's a difference between protecting your peace and building a fortress around your heart. One sets you free, the other buries you alive. Here's the gold. You can love someone and still be whole without them. You can connect deeply without clinging. You can give yourself fully without losing your center. Montaigne had friendships that were rich and emotional, especially his bond with Etienne de la Boétie. It broke his heart when la Boétie died, and still, Montaigne didn't collapse. He grieved, he honored, he stayed whole. Because true detachment doesn't kill intimacy, it strengthens it. When you're no longer driven by need, you finally start choosing from love. One of the final freedoms? Letting people think whatever they want. You won't be able to control how they see you, how they twist your words, how they reduce your complexity to their insecurity. Montaigne was misunderstood all the time, called lazy, indifferent, vague. He never rushed to correct them, because the moment you make their opinion your responsibility, you've already handed them your power. You don't need to be seen correctly to be at peace. You just need to see yourself. Let them talk, let them assume, let them invent their stories, and stay rooted in your reality. What if you didn't react to the insult, to the drama, to the provocation? What if your peace wasn't so fragile that one comment could shatter it? That's Montaigne's gift, the power of stillness in chaos. He didn't pretend the world wasn't insane. He just stopped participating in it, and that made him untouchable. If you want true strength, don't become louder. Become less available to nonsense. That's not passive. That's precision. You're not a product. You don't need a pitch. You don't need to be packaged for anyone's comfort. If you're constantly justifying your choices, your boundaries, your voice, you're still performing. Try silence instead. Try letting your no be a full sentence. Try letting your presence be enough. Try letting your energy do the talking. Montaigne didn't beg people to understand. He understood himself, and that made everything else irrelevant. When you're no longer obsessed with being liked, you start asking better questions. What brings me peace? What aligns with my soul? What am I willing to lose to stay in integrity? You stop chasing validation and start cultivating value. That shift changes your posture, your energy, your presence. People can feel it, because someone who doesn't need attention is infinitely more powerful than someone who craves it. At the end of all this philosophy, what's left? You, in a room, with no role to play, no one to impress, just breathe, stillness, and the truth. That's where Montaigne lived, not in a tower, but in a state of being. And you can too, not by escaping life, but by living it from the inside out. That's what happens when you stop caring the wrong way. You begin living the right way. We've stripped away the lies that you need to impress, that you must perform, that being liked is safety. But there's one last piece Montaigne teaches us, the hardest one. What happens when you've let go of everything and you still feel empty? That's where we go next, and it might just change the way you see life itself. You let go of people-pleasing, you stopped chasing approval, you withdrew from the noise, and then silence. At first it's peaceful, then it's uncomfortable, and eventually it can become terrifying, because now there's no one left to impress, no roles left to play, just you and the space between who you were and who you might become. This is the void. Montaigne stood in it, not as a broken man, but as one willing to rebuild his life on truth instead of illusion. When you finally stop living reactively, you're left with one question. Now what? That question is everything. It's the first time in your life you can choose without manipulation, fear, or habit. What do you want to build? What do you value when no one's watching? Montaigne shows reflection, depth, meaning, not because it was popular, but because it was real. This is the rebirth after detachment, not apathy, but intention. You stop surviving, you start living. Most people confuse detachment with emptiness. They fear that if they stop caring what others think, life will lose meaning. But that's not what happens. You don't lose meaning. You clear space for it. When your days are no longer filled with mindless yeses, when your mind is no longer crowded with fake needs, when your time isn't stolen by shallow validation, suddenly you have room for insight, for self-direction, for truth to arrive. Detachment doesn't make you numb, it makes you available. When you no longer care what others think, you stop needing people to be anything other than what they are. And that's when real love begins. Because love without need is freedom. Love without fear is power. Love without attachment is clarity. That's what Montaigne lived. He didn't perform love, he didn't weaponize it, he didn't clutch it like a prize. He offered it and let go of the outcome. That's a level of wholeness few ever reach, and it only begins when you stop tying your worth to anyone else's opinion. You might think detachment is the destination, but it's not. It's the door you walk through so you can finally start the real journey. The journey of creation, the journey of presence, the journey of choosing, not reacting. Detachment is how you clear the illusions. What you build after that, that's your truth. And Montaigne's life wasn't a withdrawal, it was a refinement, a precise rejection of all that wasn't soul, so he could walk toward what was. Here's what Montaigne teaches us if we really listen. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to chase a single thing. You already are. You can walk away from noise, from games, from false duty. You can live your life quietly, clearly, powerfully. You can laugh, you can rest, you can be misunderstood and still be at peace. Because the final freedom is this: nothing outside of you gets to define who you are, not anymore. Now it's your turn to go inward, to return to your center, to stop caring in all the right ways, and begin living for something real. No one can do it for you. No one will give you permission. You don't need it. You're allowed to set yourself free, right now. What's one thing you're finally ready to stop caring about? Drop it in the comments and let it go for real. And if this spoke to something deep in you, give the video a like so it can reach more people who need to hear this. For more bold, soul-cutting psychology like this, join our community of people walking towards the light. Subscribe and click the notification bell to never miss new insights. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.